Hey everyone, welcome to the KE report and a company update from Power Metallic, traded on the TSX Venture Exchange under the symbol PNPN, on the OTC markets under the symbol PNPNF, and the Frankfurt Exchange 1VV. We are chatting with Terry Lynch, CEO of Power Metallic. Now, Terry, I want to start off by quickly recapping some of the news. The company has raised a lot of money with some well-known investors. You have increased the current drill program to now planning 100,000 meters over the next 21 months, really to the end of 2026. That is fully funded. This is all happening at the NISK Project in Quebec, and it sounds like a lot of this exploration is truly that, growing off of other discoveries, trying to make new discoveries and tie together different areas. I do have to start off by asking, though, in terms of share price action, it was a great run to start off this year and a great move through 2024. However, the share price seemed to have peaked right in that February March time frame while you were announcing these drill program, the increase in the drill program, as well as some drill results. The stock has faded since. So, any insights on this action in the stock? It seems like a lot of the news has been positive, but the market's gone the other way on you.
Yeah, a couple of things. I think just after we raised the capital in late February, about a week later, the tariff shenanigans began with President Trump, and that sort of destabilized pretty much the entire mining market, many other markets as well. And so I think there's a lot of stocks that sort of got whacked a bit just because, fear entered the arena and people were thinking, well, you know what, I made a bunch of money in power metallic, maybe I should take it off the table, and I don't know what's going to happen in the future. That whole fear and greed thing. So fear was over driving greed, and that led to pressure on the stock. And we stopped marketing because we thought, wow, in this choppy environment where every second day a different philosophy on the tariffs and different rates, and it was just very noisy, hard to sort of get heard and make intelligence to investors at that point. So we thought we pulled back on our marketing programs, and as you know, we've been pretty aggressive in terms of getting our story out there. But we stopped for a couple months because of the sort of disarray in the broader market. And of course, when you stop marketing, you stop bringing in new names and new people. Any selling tends to dictate the price action. So the selling action started to go down. The shorts, who are inevitably part of every story in Canada, pushed it further, and so that led to the decline where we're at. But now that there's been some sort of relative peace, in the tariff world, where investors have sort of come back to the fray, buying more of the broader market, and we've come back. We started to market about a week ago, and we're now back. You sort of where it bottomed out at $1. I think it's coming back around. We've had a lot of really great conversations with investors, and the moral of the story is, hey, the story is completely intact. It's an even better, really. We've got tons of cash. We, of course, the last couple drill assay results, while they're positive in growing the resource, they weren't and not as euphoric as the many other assays before that. And maybe people saw that as, well, as bad news, but it shouldn't be perceived as bad news. It's actually positive news. You're not going to have 32 meters of 7% every single assay. That's the reality, or you wouldn't be doing your job, because you got to try and test how big these things, and eventually all deposits in. So you'll eventually get to the border of it, and you'll find there's nothing there, and then you step back. So we're basically defining those parameters now, but we still have. I've said to people, I don't think we're anywhere close to releasing our best holes. I think our best holes are in front of us. We're fully funded. The technology that we've used to identify these resources is working. We've got the world's best minds on this program. It's really just an unbelievable sort of set of circumstances, and so that's why we're getting back out and doing shows like yourselves, and getting the word back out, because we think it's a tremendous time for those that maybe missed the first run. Don't miss the second. That's my message to people, is that you missed the first dollar in Power Metallic, but you haven't missed the next 10, and that's the one you want to get.
Well, I think that's a good message, Terry, especially taking advantage of the pullback to get in front of this huge drill program. Let's talk about the drill program. So some of those holes you just released that you were mentioning, I think they were still very high grade on the copper, and you had a nice kicker of gold and silver in there, palladium and nickel, but maybe just a little more narrow widths. But you're going to be testing the Lion Zone at depth. And then you're also going to be spending a large amount of energy and drilling to try to connect the area between Lion and NISK East. So maybe talk first about the depth component at Lion. You're down about 600 meters, so maybe talk to us about where you're going.
Yeah, so we'll keep on pushing that down. The interesting thing is that, generally speaking, these polymetallics, and especially in this part of the world in the Abitibi, if the width is X, the depth will be like 10X. So our width right now is about 550 meters where we have strike length on the top part of the line. So that would imply it could go as deep as 5.5 kilometers. So we're at 600 meters. So there's a long ways to go. Now, at some point, we're not going to be drilling 2 kilometer deep holes. That's not going to make sense. But we might, we certainly can drill up to a kilometer, I think, and just show you that it's still open at depth. These are folded systems, so you get some thick intersections and then some thinner intersections, then they get thicker again. We've seen that all the way down. So, the fact that, we're getting like 5 meter sections of 8 or 9%, shouldn't depress people. That's like enormously attractive rock and very economic widths. But it'll probably be followed by another big section. So we'll definitely be pursuing that at Lion. The other thing that we think will be interesting is that, these polymetallic systems, the way they should be perceived visually in your mind's eye is, think of your hand, and you got the palm of your hand and fingers. Okay. So what happened, for sure, when this zone was originated, is there was a giant nickel sulfide, a very rich one, because to have the richness of Lion, you'd have to have a nickel sulfide zone that's like plus 2% nickel, plus 2% copper, over a gram of PGMs. That would be what would have generated this. So what happened is some sort of hydrothermal action happened, picked up the copper sulfides, brought it up to the surface, and they dissipate into these pipes. The Lion zone is one of these pipes. Okay, so the way your fingers are, you got 4 of them. Well, the way these polymetallic systems work is there's going to be multiple pipes. There's no polymetallic systems of the orthomagmatic variety that exists with one pipe. There are always multiple pipes. So we have to find them. That's the key trick. And of course, we've got the capital to do it, and we've got the technology. So we've got some good ideas where these next pipes will be. So, one of the things that we look for over the summer is to find the next pipe. Will it be Tiger? Don't know. We need more drilling there. Will it be something that's further west of Lion? Moving towards NISK? Could well be. We think there'll be pipes on either side of this, to be honest with you. So I think we're excited about finding the next pipes. We're excited about extending Lion, and we're excited about connecting Lion and NISK, because any one of those events will send a serious rush through the stock. Because at the end of the day, we think there's 2 ways that the stock really sort of gets back and moves to even newer highs. Is it gets re-rated because we're fundamentally undervalued relative to other polymetallic discoveries that are listed in Canada. And so that's one. Second, we'll grow with the resource. So as our resource grows, as our analysts say, hey, you've gone from having 10 million tons at 7% to now 15 million tons to 20 million tons, or we start to kick in with the nickel zone, that's going to make a big rush. So there's a lot of reasons to expect that the summer drill program will provide a lot of excitement. And we're certainly, the guys, the team are extremely excited. All the scientists are very stoked.
Look, with 6 rigs that are coming to site, you are going to have a lot of news. And it does sound like a lot of this drilling is very exploration focused as well. But big picture, 100,000 meters, again, to the end of next year, 2026. Does that get you resources? What's the end game here after this 100,000 meters?
Yeah, so I would think, we're obviously building the basis to do a initial resource calculation for Lion Zone and for NISK overall. We'll do a MET study. We're in the midst of that now, so that we can actually get that out as early as we can, probably, hopefully this year, so that we can give people guidance on what are the recoveries going to be. Like, that's one of the, normal business concerns one would have with a deposit like this, is to say, hey, how much can you recover of all these various metal types? And the answer is, we think, we've been carrying 80% recoveries for our copper equivalent calculations. I asked Robert Friedman what he thought, and he said, look, we're getting high 80s, low 90s in Platte Reef. He says, I'm sure you'll get there. And our feeling is we'll probably get in the high 80s, low 90s, but let's prove it, so that people can validate that. And then, what we're doing, from a modeling perspective, is we're putting out all the drill collars and assays and azimuths, allowing the independent analysts of the world and the desktop analysts. There's a lot of really smart investors out there that know how to use Leapfrog and stuff like that and can model things up themselves and are doing it, and they'll come up with their numbers. And that'll be some sort of consensus out there. We'll eventually formalize this probably towards the end of 2026. So we'll come up with a more forecast number. Generally, when you have the Philos and Great Bear type discoveries, which we think NISK is a world-class discovery, you don't contain it or try and sort of minimize it by doing the 43-101 too soon. You want to let it run, because people sometimes when you get a 43-101, they say, okay, well, that's what you got. Well, in fact, we have no idea what we got. We know it's going to be a lot bigger. So we got to let sort of like the ground sort of tell us when to do this. So we think it's probably later next year. But in the interim, we can get the feasibility, not the feasibility, but the metallurgical studies done and get those economics so people can start to factor that in. But publish the data so that people can independently model it and carry along with us.
Well, Terry, let's also talk about the initiative you have in this program to connect Lion to NISK East and just how large of a strike length that is. I think it's over 5 kilometers. What early work have you done, and where will the drilling go to connect those two areas?
Yeah, so we did a lot of ground EM, airborne EM, and we've been doing a lot of chem work to sort of identify where we should go there. So we've got a pretty good idea now of how we want to pursue that. So the team is, laying out the targets, and we'll definitely execute on that this summer and lock it in. And as we drill these holes, and they'll be sort of 300 to 400 meters spacings, as we cross, from Lion to NISK, and might be coming both directions really. And as we do them, we'll be doing the borehole EM so that each hole will become like 150-meter diameter in terms of our look and our ability to sort of see the charged nickel sulfide or copper sulfide bodies that may be indicated. And of course, as we see those bodies, like if the initial hole is a duster, i.e. doesn't pick up mineralization, it doesn't mean it's not a great hole, because if it shows us another plate, then we go drill the other plate. And that's sort of what we'll be doing. So, we're drilling these, maybe there's, I think there's 12 or so holes that will be drilled, in terms of the step outs. But off of those 12 holes, we might drill another 12 to identify the plates and start to lock those in. And then when one of these plates turns into the Lion zone, we'll be peppering it with, jam 20 holes in, like we did for Lion. So that's sort of the plan, is be reactive to what the field is giving you. But we've got a very, focused effort on we know what we're doing. We know how to sort of find these things. We've got the science working for us. And when the science shows it up, we'll hammer it with some force in terms of drilling.
Just remind us how big of an area this is, what you're testing here, and all these targets that you're testing. Lion, you're drilling. Tiger, we had recent results on. This gap between NISK and Lion. Anything else that we need to be aware of that will be drilled in this 100,000-meter program?
Yeah, we'll be going east of NISK as well. There's pardon me, not east, but west of NISK as well. There's some good ground there that's definitely going to be drilled. So the strike length that we'll be drilling is probably sort of in the order of magnitude of 8 or 9 kilometers. So there's a lot of targets there. And as I said, the good news is that we've got like a systematic approach to how to sort of identify really sort of honed in targets. And then when we strike the Lion zones, like just to give you an example, Lion, February of last year, stock was 20 cents. We drilled 16 holes in just under 3 months, and 8 of those holes were epic and turned Lion into what it is, right? And the stock quadrupled. And so, the Lion holes when you find them, takes about 3 months worth of drilling. I would say a focused 16, 20 hole programs to really turn it into a zone. And so when we find these holes, then of course we'll throw the rigs at it in a hurry so we can punch that up, because obviously we're going to get paid as a company in terms of market cap by generating more resource in the ground. So that'll be the approach.
Terry, I also want you to maybe spend a quick minute for people that haven't caught up with the company in a while and explain why you changed the company name from Power Nickel to Power Metallic. We had joked with you at Beaver Creek that you needed to do a name change just because you had a polymetallic deposit, but now you're reporting copper equivalent ounces at copper equivalent pounds. So maybe just speak about the copper component, why that's hit the forefront, but that you're still a complex deposit.
Yeah, 2 reasons for the change. The first reason is that some people weren't even taking meetings because we were nickel. Power nickel, they literally wouldn't take meetings. So they say, we're not interested in nickel. And it's like, that's just a perception thing. Like nickel, has like a 4-letter word to it, but nickel is actually a great commodity. It gets, even at 15.7, it's like still almost 60% more than copper. So it's like copper's hot, but yeah, you get 60% more for nickel. So it's like, it's not a bad word. The challenge is nickel grades have been low. You know what I mean? So if you have a low grade deposit in nickel, it's just going to be misery because the Indonesians will kill you. But our lifting costs will be less than the Indonesians. So we're going to make a ton of money on nickel because we got copper, we got PGs, we got the second best PG discovery in the planet. Okay, platinum, palladium are starting to rip. You think our copper equivalent numbers were high? Wait until platinum and palladium go to $1,500. We'll go from 7% to 9% just like that. We've got a very rich discovery. So that's the grade is the key, right? I mean, that's what's really the news here is that we got big grade and big possible tonnage. So nickel, we changed the name just simply to reflect that I got tired of not getting meetings with people that should be taking meetings with us. I got tired of having explained the first 5 minutes of every meeting that, hey, we're not a nickel story, we're a copper PGE story. And yeah, there's going to be nickel too. But, you'd spend, sort of talking about negatives as opposed to leading with your positives. So we said, you know what, let's not fight it anymore. Let's change to what we really are, which is polymetallic. So we call it power metallic. Again, not because we're anti-nickel. We think nickel's fantastic. We think this is a nickel sulfide discovery. It's a rare one called the orthomagmatic, which is the best type of mine you can have in the history of the world. And we've got one. There's only like 20 of them in all the history of the world, and they're super rare. So we're proud of our nickel heritage. It's just from a marketing perspective, it made sense to switch so we could deal with the positives.
All right, Terry, thanks for the update here. Sounds like a lot of news coming, a lot of drilling ongoing, and again, kind of that's discovery focused or at least growth focused drilling. You're cashed up for it, and now you're bringing on more rigs to the site. So everyone, if you want more information on what's going on with Power Metallic, click the link in the show notes. Send us any questions you have for Terry, and we'll follow up as some of these drill results are announced. So Terry, thank you very much for the update.
Thanks for having us, guys. Have a great day. Cheers for now.